Hi everyone, I'm Sarah Baker, and this is Momma Stories. I created Momma Stories after seeing how impactful sharing stories can be in overcoming the challenges of motherhood. I am where I am today because of the stories of so many amazing, strong mamas, and I want to share that with every mom I can. So follow along to laugh, cry, and be empowered. Thanks for tuning in to today's show. Have you heard about how we are changing the story for moms? Momma Fund is a nonprofit organization that is dedicated to providing products, services, and education to moms in need. So check us out at mommafund.org. All right, today on the show, we have somebody very special. We have Kori with us, and Kori's actually going to be with us for 2 episodes because she's a mom and she's a midwife.
Well, let's see. In terms of being a mom, I have 2 kids. My wife is Rachel. We've been married for almost 6 years. And we have 2 kids who we conceived at home with a known donor. And
Like you birthed at home?
I didn't know I conceived. I did birth
conceived
at home with Arlo. My first kiddo's name is Greta, and she's almost 5. She'll be 5 in July. And then Arlo is 18 months old. My wife and I got pregnant a month after we got married, and she's really gross. I'm a midwife, so I am like very comfortable with vaginas and cervixes and all of that stuff. And she was like, "Oh my God, you want me to what with a speculum and put what where?" And I was like, "Oh, come on, just come here. I'll put the speculum in myself, and you put the semen up there." And she was like, "Oh God," It was not a sexy experience, but it worked on our first try. And as a midwife, I was definitely I know a lot of things that can happen or not happen. And I was worried about twins, and I was worried, or not worried. I knew that it was possible. So I definitely wanted an early ultrasound. I felt like knowing as early as possible.
Did you know there was twins because they run in your, they run
they're
in the
not twins.
donors?
No. I just generally
know the possibility of twins.
Yes.
Okay,
and
so you were anxious about that.
Yeah.
Okay.
And which is interesting. You'll hear that it becomes more interesting in my second pregnancy.
Okay.
Anyway, I had an early ultrasound. She was there, but it was really hard for me to believe that there was actually a human inside of me, which was so interesting because I had been a midwife for, I think 11 or 12 years by the time I had conceived Greta.
Oh, before. Okay.
Yes. And that was a fascinating experience, just being on the pregnant side of things, but also feeling like it was so surreal. And I talk to moms about that all the time. I'm like, even as a midwife, I was like, theoretically, there's a human growing inside of me. Who knows? Maybe I'm just imagining this. Maybe I'm, like maybe that was someone else's ultrasound picture that they showed me. And my friends were like, "You're crazy." And my midwife friends. And even like feeling the baby move, I was like, "Oh, it's like I have a twitch in my uterus." And they were like, "When have you ever felt a twitch in your uterus?"
Yeah.
And I was like, right, that's the baby moving.
Did this happen like the whole pregnancy or?
Yes.
Okay.
Like until it was at 28 weeks. I tell this story a lot in the birth classes that I teach, that at 28 weeks, I was sitting in the middle of the night peeing on the toilet and staring. The bathroom was connected to the room that was like her room. And I was like, holy shit, we have a new roommate moving into our house and we don't even know who it is. Like, what if we don't like her? What if we, you know what I mean? Like all those things where you're like, oh my God, wait, who is coming out of me? What is happening? Like, I just did the mic hitting thing. Sorry.
It's okay.
I like had the realization that there was like a person coming,
Yeah.
even though I logically knew that was the end of the process, obviously, and seen many, many babies come out of other women, So,
And obviously when you had her, was there obviously like this, oh my gosh, now I know my roommate.
Yes.
Now I know this beautiful little girl.
I mean, I think it was yes, definitely. I was so happy. I mean, but still you're like, who are you?
Oh, for sure.
You know?
Yeah.
And we had planned a home birth with her, with the midwives I was working with, that I worked for at the time. I worked at a different birth center prior to Women's Healthcare Associates. And I had planned to have a home birth, though I knew as a first-time mom, I was like, have a higher rate of transfer. So I knew that it was a possibility. And I, at the end of my pregnancy, was listening to her heartbeat myself. I just was like, she had always been in the same position. So I was just kind of curious what was going on with her in there. And I heard before I was just starting to feel like a little bit crampy. And I was like 41 weeks. And I was like, maybe this is the start of labor. And I was hearing spontaneous big dips in her heart rate, and I wasn't in labor at all. And I was like, oh, that happened at nighttime. And I ran to the bed, listening with the Doppler, laid down, was like, okay, it recovered. And I was like, all right, I'm not going to make too big of a deal out of that. I'm going to listen again tomorrow. I didn't even tell my wife that it had happened because I was like, okay, nobody else would ever know that was happening. I'm just going to I'll listen again.
You're saying any other mom in that situation
yes.
wouldn't know to look for that and wouldn't even potentially have a way to hear.
Doppler at home to be listening or know what it meant. And so I was like, and I also knew that that can happen randomly, and maybe I just totally randomly heard it,
Yeah.
So I listened again the next day, and I heard it again. And so my wife was at work. I was just about to go out for a walk, I think, or something. And I was like, oh, I'll just listen to make sure everything's fine. And then I heard a big decrease in her heart rate again. And I was like, okay, I knew. Then I just started sort of going into the midwife brain and midwifing myself in some ways. I was like, okay, I need more monitoring. Should I go to the birth center or should I go to the hospital? If it looks bad or if it looks really bad, I might need a C-section right away. So why don't we just go to the hospital? So I'm there. If it looks perfect, I can leave, And I was closer to the hospital. So I called my wife home from work. Somebody came to take care of our dog. I felt scared but also something else that I talk about in the classes that I teach, I felt like I was like, okay, I just have to do what this is mothering, I have to do whatever I have to do for this baby. If I have to have, I thought that there was a very good chance that I would have a C-section with her. And I was like, I'm sad for myself if that is my experience, just because it's really different than the experience that I was hoping for. And
Sure.
I help a lot of women through cesareans, but I've helped a lot of women through natural birth or vaginal birth also. And but on the way there, I was like, okay, but I'll be okay. If that's what I have to do, I believe that I can get through that, that it's very scary to me, that it's going to be hard on my body. But if that's what I have to do, I'll do it. And I had to sort of come to peace with that on my way there. And thankfully when we got there, she was still having tons of these dips in her heart rate. And, but she was fine overall. And they were like, you could go home. And I was like, and come back in an ambulance in labor because she's really struggling. No, let's just have a baby. I'm 41 weeks. Let's just do an induction now. And thankfully it was the hospital where we transferred to a lot. And they gave me a lot of, just leeway and liberty to do it. I mean, they were very, very accommodating to me.
And they also knew you were an expert, right? That you've helped women through this.
Yes.
Because when you say transfer, you're talking about your patients.
Yes.
That are trying to birth here or at a birth center
or home. And then we transfer into the hospital.
Okay.
And we didn't at the birth center I was at before, we didn't do hospital births. We do here, but so I mean, we went with our patients as like a support person in labor, but we weren't the provider attending like their birth or providing the care in the hospital. We were there as support people, or like a doula role.
Okay.
And but yes, they knew that they were like, you have like the most informed choice or consent of anyone. You know, I was like, I know, like, yes, she looks like her heart rate looks like crap when I lay on this side, or like it's very flat, but she's still moving. And if I turn to this side, the variability looks better, like these very technical things.
Yeah.
But I'm like, I just was like, I felt like I was dancing on the knife, basically. I was like, okay, I'm just gonna like, can I eke this baby out, essentially, you know? And I did. It was great. I ended up, they started with Cervidil, which is like a ripening agent. And
is that like an injection?
It's not an injection. It looks like a little tampon, basically, that they like stick next to your cervix, and it has medication in it to help soften your cervix. And then actually one of my coworkers now was the midwife who was on with me that night, and she had been a coworker with me before at the other birth center I was at. And I'm like, I'm so sorry, Michelle. Cause I was like, I'm not getting out of the shower. You can come take my blood pressure in the shower. I was a pain in the ass patient. The nurses, there was a student nurse working with me, and they would like send her in to tell me things. She'd be like, they said, and I was like, you tell them to come in here and talk to me if they want to tell me to do something different, because I'm not doing it. And I ended up getting an epidural when we were starting Pitocin, just because I was having pretty severe back pain, and we had to take out the first medication, and I needed to be monitored, and that's why I was there. You know, I had to like come to reason to be like, okay, I need to lay still, you know, to be able to monitor this baby. That's why I'm at the hospital. So let's get an epidural. And I was very thankful for it, because my friends, the midwives who were there with me, were just like pushing on my back as hard as they could. I just had, in both of my labors, really intense bone pain, back pain, and like sits bone pain. So the epidural was great, and I like kept begging them to turn the Pitocin back on, because they kept turning it off because her heart rate was like, but I was like, I have to have contractions to have a baby. Like, we all know this. Yeah. And
how long was that? How long were you in labor?
It was about 24 hours that I was there.
Wow.
And but it wasn't, labor was like 12, I would say, from when I started, or like 10, you know, from when I started.
It's a long time.
Oh, that's nothing. I've had taken care of so many people with very much longer labor. So that was great. I was like, it was amazing. I mean, I really drew on the strength and the like experiences that I had been through with other women. It had such an impact on my like ability to cope with the experience that I was having. That I had been through these things with so many other people, that like, what a gift to me that I got to have that emotionally, really, you know. I mean, that we say that it's an honor to be with women and their experiences, and like, it really, I drew on that, on the experiences of so many other people, and being like, okay, like, she was okay, I'm gonna be okay, like, I am gonna like come out of this a whole person, and whatever it is, whatever it takes, you know. But finally, like, when I could tell that she was really low and that I was close to pushing, and I was like, okay, get the OB in here. Like, I consent to a vacuum. I am going to push like hell and get this baby out as fast as I can, because I know her heart rate is going to like tank when I'm pushing. You know, I was like, Is
that what naturally happens?
Well, I figured she was tangled in her cord because of what we were seeing. And I was like, oh, when I start to push, that's all going to get tightened, basically. Sure. And the doctor was like, okay. She ended up like taking photos for me and like wiping my butt, you know, and there was like a student midwife in there. I was like, hold my leg. I was just like bossing everybody around in the room.
Well, you know what you're doing.
And it was just, I mean, it's really funny when I look back on it. I'm like, oh, that is just I'm sure that they were talking about it in a funny way for like weeks. They were like, oh God, remember when that midwife had her baby and like the crazy things that they did? But I like caught her myself, you know.
Oh, you did?
Yes. Cause I mean,
Wow.
especially with the epidural, it was like, and a lot of women have the experience that you're feeling a lot still of the like ring of fire and the baby coming out. But I was like, it was such a familiar feeling to me because I've been there feeling so many babies emerge from women's vaginas that I was like, okay, like I know what to do. And one of the nurses who I'd worked with a lot was like, I was like doing perineal massage on myself and like catching her. And then I was like, I can't do the cord. Somebody has to untangle this cord. Like,
because it was tangled around
She had
her.
a nuchal cord it was around her neck 3 times. And
wow.
so they unwrapped her. And then I was like to the NICU, I was like, you give me that baby. I don't care what she looks like. Let me try to resuscitate her first or like see if I can get her to come around. Cause they were just antsy to have her, you know? And I just had the midwife that was there with me that I worked with just stimulate her. And she came around really easy. She didn't need anything.
Wow.
But I just was like very protective, you know,
Yeah.
of her. And I was so relieved. And my poor wife, who's like does not like blood, does not want like lacerations and vaginas. And like I said, cervixes is just like, oh God. She was just, you know, I mean, she was such a great support and like right there with me the whole time, like so brave herself and just sobbing when when Greta was born. And she was a tiny little peanut. She was 6 pounds, 6 ounces. And
little.
Once she was out, I was like, the whole time in my head, I was like, okay, if I don't have a C-section, like I'm leaving as soon as the baby's out. And so I left after my epidural wore off. I left 3 hours after the baby was born. I was like, okay, I had what I needed here, and now we're leaving.
3 hours?
And I was like, as soon as I can walk and pee, I'm gone, you know?
And and the hospital lets you leave that early?
Yeah.
Gosh,
Well,
I felt like we could not get out fast enough. It took us so long.
I know, it takes forever. And I'm like, I tell people all the time, like, you are in charge of your own body. They can tell you what they recommend, but they are not holding you hostage there.
Oh, it felt like it though for me because we wanted to go. We were like ready to go. And I had a friend who had a baby a couple weeks before and she was like, oh, milk it. Like stay as long as you can. And I was like,
get me out of here.
I just want home. Like, not that it wasn't a great place. I loved the hospital, but it just felt really not at home.
And you get interrupted so much in the hospital. I mean, the other thing for me, I knew the pediatrician who was on also because I had like been, you know, so I was like, I know what you're recommending. I understand what you're saying, but thank you for the information and I'm going to go home, you know, and give me whatever papers you need me to sign. And they use the, like the fear tactic a lot in the hospital, like your insurance might not pay for it. And it's not true. They will pay. They pay for the services that you, whatever, however they're going to.
If you left early, wouldn't that be cheaper for the insurance?
So, the pediatrician was like, okay, like, let me just do a couple things. You know, they like wrapped it up quickly. And I was able to leave the hospital 3 hours later with her. And I felt like I was like taking somebody else's baby out of the hospital a little bit. I was like, God, I'm like leaving the hospital with a baby because I had never done that before. I'd been at many births, you know, it was like such an out of body experience in some ways and sorry, my watch. It was such an out of body experience in some ways and such a, just a trip as a midwife and a mom.
It's like a familiar place that's so unfamiliar.
Yes. Like so I was like, they're letting, you know, like, wait, they're letting me take this baby with me, you know?
Yeah.
And of course I thought she was like the cutest baby ever born. And I tell moms, I'm like, you literally think that your baby is actually the cutest baby that was ever born. And you like feel sorry for all the other moms in the world. You're like, oh, I'm so sorry. Like I had the cutest one, you know? And I like look back at pictures of her and she was so cute. She had tons of hair. And she was so tiny, but then like, I was like, oh, but then, you know, they start losing the hair. They go through the awkward phases. And I'm like, I still thought you were like the cutest human that was ever born.
Yeah.
So
I still can't believe you left the hospital 3
I
hours
know,
later.
I was so crazy. But I also had the midwives that had been taking care of me were
Sure.
going to do the normal home visits and like continue to provide
Yeah.
my care and be on call for me. So I knew that I had support if
Yeah.
I needed anything, you
Yeah.
know? And
That's
like I
still
just
so
had,
cool though.
I know, I was like, I'm out of here. I didn't want to jinx it. I felt like if I said anything prior to the baby being out of my body that I might jinx that, like I would have a C-section.
Oh,
Then I
yeah,
would have
yeah.
to stay for a few days, whatever, you know, like, or like something crazy would happen with her. I just was like, once she's out and fine, I'm going to tell everybody that
Yeah.
I'm out of here.
Was your wife like, excuse me?
I think that I might have told her in
Okay.
the process of labor that if everything goes fine, we're out of here.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And then it was summer, mid-July, and it was just like I was like so excited for everybody in the world to meet her, you know, as you just are like, so many people came over to our house and brought us food. We had a meal train for a long time, which was great.
That's
Like
so
a couple
great.
months. It was great.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
That's
it was
really great.
awesome. And we, you know, like over the first couple weeks, I think it took me I had pretty severe postpartum anxiety with Greta,
Okay.
and I didn't know it, which was because I think with anxiety, or what I've come to realize is that, it's like your truth with a capital T is the things you're anxious about, you know? And so you cannot it's like not a rational
Right.
thing. So I was like trying so hard to be like the perfect mom and so anxious about that and felt so guilty all the time. And,
Could you give an example of what you mean by that?
well, like, I was like, you know, had all of these things that I was like, I'm not going to do that or whatever
Sure.
before, like
Yeah.
pacifiers. And then I
Oh,
did
me
give a
too.
pacifier. And then I was like, but I didn't just do it and feel like this is the right thing. I worried so obsessively about whether it was going to harm her in the long run. I also like tracked every eating, pooping, peeing, sleeping for like 10 months, maybe, like that. I was like, now looking back, I'm like, oh, it was like anxiety, OCD kind of, you know? And people didn't like, I mean, I told people that I was struggling. I was like, cause I was crying all the time and just so worried that everything I was doing, like I tell people that I'm like, I literally thought like she was going to be brain damaged if she didn't sleep the right amount. And like, I just went like off the rails, you know. I was like, and my mom, you know, later she was like, yeah, I was really surprised at how you were mothering, like that's who you were as a mom, because like I'm not uptight really in the rest of my life, you know. Or like that really controlled person, and I was like so controlling every aspect, trying to control.
Yeah.
And she is a human being.
Yeah.
Like looking back, I'm like, you cannot make somebody sleep. I thought I could make her sleep. It was like, it's crazy. And now I say it and I'm like, oh my God, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it took me almost 2 years to realize that I had postpartum anxiety.
And you mentioned that people didn't mention it to you.
People knew that I was having a hard time, and they were like, you should go to these like mom groups. And it felt like I was trying to like reach out to be like, I'm not happy. Like I just was constantly in a state of like guilt, overwhelm, sadness, worry. And I was like, is this normal? Also those like the intrusive thoughts, which I like talked to my friends about. I was like, you know, you're like walking down the sidewalk and you like see yourself suddenly like tripping into the road and somebody like running you over. Or like falling off a bridge.
Oh,
like,
man.
And moms all say that they have those things. And so I'm like, okay, there is like it's just such a spectrum. Like, you know, where you're like, okay, that's normal. And it just made me realize like my own experience has really helped me in being a midwife, in that I'm like,
I bet.
Oh, like the postpartum hormones lend themselves very easily to anxiety, you know, and to like, because you're supposed to be like obsessed with keeping this baby alive, right?
Yeah.
But it can it can like just tip to a
Well, and you
not
mentioned-
normal spot, you
Yeah.
know?
Well, and you mentioned the like logic of it, right? Like you think back to it now and you're like, oh, well, that doesn't really make a lot of sense. I shouldn't have thought like that, or why would I even go down that path? But then there almost is no real logic.
No. It's like I read something somewhere, you know, I was like on too many
Yeah.
websites and too many books, and I latched on to some little thing, and it was like went off the deep end. You know, I was just like, oh my God.
And you said it took till Greta was 2.
Almost 2, yes.
So what was like do you have like a moment where you were like, wait a second, or was it just kind of gradual, or?
No, it was a moment where I was like, wait a second. I was having I was a midwife and on call all the time too. So like the sleep was it was like this snowball effect. She was a very hard sleeper. She was up every 45 minutes to an hour and a half until she was 13 months old. So that coupled with
Sounds like my son.
being on call all the time and
Yeah.
like the fear of my phone ringing, because she was sleeping in the same room with us when she was asleep finally, and like I couldn't fall asleep because I was so anxious, and like every little noise she made, you know, I just had such a hard time sleeping. So sleep in general was just a huge focus for us, you know,
and a big gap. It sounds like you just
yes.
weren't getting enough sleep.
Yes, and I was on call as a midwife, so I'd be up in the middle of the night whenever, you know.
Yeah. And you would be delivering babies at this time?
Yes.
When did you go back to work?
I went back to work at 3 months postpartum, and
Okay.
I took only my repeat clients for the first like 6 months. So through, I guess until she was about 8 months old. So that meant that I knew them already. I joke, I'm like that they knew that I used to be a smart person, you know, that I used to be able to speak coherently about like things that happen in pregnancy or supplements or whatever. And that they were familiar with pregnancy, that we had like a former, because the practice that I worked in, we did continuity of care. Like I took full care of the women who I was caring for, the clients I was caring for and their families, and then was also the midwife at their birth. So
Okay.
I really knew them and they knew me. So it was a little easier, and they were second-time moms, which meant typically the births were more straightforward, faster, all of those kinds of things.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, I look back and I'm like, it's crazy, but thankfully adrenaline is a great hormone to help you like be able to function, you know,
Yeah.
in births or whatever, you know, in your life.
Hey guys, are we best friends yet? Make sure that you are following Momma Stories on Instagram and Facebook at The Momma Stories. Also, you can check us out at mommastories.com. There you can read, share, and even sign up to be on this podcast. So go do it right now. Well, maybe after this episode.
Yeah, there was lots of different moments. I was very like terrified and thought that sleep training was like this like horrible, like abusive thing to do to my kid. And then at 13 months, I was like, I'm so angry at her in the middle of the night that it is worse for her than crying, actually.
Yeah, I hear you on that.
So I had to come to terms with it, and it was awful for me. You know, I really had to leave the house we like hired a sleep trainer because of the anxiety, which I still didn't realize was there. Like it was, again, like I'm like harming her by doing this, but I also know that it's not working, you know?
See, when we did sleep training with Grayson, it was 9.5 months into no sleep. And we actually had a tease when I switched to formula. I stopped breastfeeding pretty early on. Grayson started sleeping really big chunks in the night. And so we, for like a month, had like a baby that slept 6 to 7 hours at night. So I was a whole new mom.
Yes.
And then it stopped. And so at 9.5 months, I'll never forget, we started sleep training, and my husband's like, you know, walking around the room. He's like, I can't do this. I can't listen to it. And I was like, then you go.
You made him leave.
Yes. See ya, because I need to sleep, and this is working. So good night. Bye-bye.
Like, so
I
funny.
was like, get out of the house.
Thankfully it was like August or September when we did it. And I was like, I'm just going to go like walk our neighborhood, you know, like it's beautiful out. I'm going to call somebody on the phone who can like listen to me obsess about whether this is okay or not, and then but not be home.
But did it work?
It did.
Yes.
We did it. We hired a sleep trainer, a sleep consultant, and we actually did it twice. The first time it did not work. We did for 2 weeks.
Wow.
She cried for 2 hours, and I was like, and the sleep trainer was like, we should stop and try again a little bit later. She could not. She would sit up immediately when she woke up forever. She would just sit herself up, and then she could not find her pacifier. And I was like, oh my God. I was like,
you're like, find the
why? Like, why can't? And she just would sit there crying. And I was like, oh my God, just lay down. Just lay back down.
Oh man.
I mean, it's crazy. So many moms will be like, yes.
Yeah.
And I mean, I just felt at that point, so the sleep training, I was like, I'm not okay. I was so exhausted, but then the anxiety kept going. And at some point I just was like, oh, it like something clicked and it dawned on me. I was like, I have postpartum anxiety. And I must have read something or I don't know, and it was like this light bulb moment at about, I think 18 months. And also I was changing jobs and I was a counselor that I was saying was like, do you want medication for this anxiety that you're having? And I was like, oh, this is like a thing, a medicatable thing. Okay. Like it was sort of validated by somebody else. And I did start taking medication and it like really changed my life. I was like, oh, I don't have to live like this all the time. And I think I probably have always had sort of underlying anxiety, but not to the extent that it got in my postpartum time. And I think it really affected my bonding with Greta and, but like we're working on repairing that. And like kids are adaptable and flexible. And like
they are.
I loved her. It was just not in the way like I want to repair some of that early relationship, you know?
Well, and you went into more like a protective mode, right?
Yes.
And like
instead of a connecting, it was like I tell people like I was trying to control her instead of like seeing her for a little person, you know?
Yeah. And it's totally normal. Like almost every mom I talk to has something very similar.
Yeah.
And in my whole journey with Mama Stories and with motherhood and all this is that I just feel like we don't share it enough.
Yes. I try to share it as a midwife. I'm like, we teach birth classes here and I try to be really open with people about it just so I'm like, I don't want you to get stuck in this, and to be able, if I, as a midwife who knows things, couldn't see that earlier on, like couldn't recognize this, like I specifically check in. And there's actually, in my second pregnancy, the midwife, in Arlo's pregnancy, the midwife had me do it's called the perinatal anxiety screening something or other. And it's from Australia. And I was like, oh my God, this is so helpful. Like if I had done this, it's just a screening tool for anxiety. And
is it like a online like questionnaire?
It's a questionnaire. Exactly.
Okay.
And it was really helpful to see like where you cross the lines of normalcy basically, because it is all such a like a spectrum of, there is like from the normal feelings that everybody feels to like the extreme and like where do you draw that line? And it was helpful for me just to read those things. And so often if I know somebody has had anxiety or something, I'm like, oh, you should like look at this at least to know for yourself, like, because you're often like, wait, is this normal? Is this not?
Yeah. Oh gosh, it's like the question I feel like I still ask myself all the time.
Yes, because babies and kids are weird, and becoming a mom is weird. It's like,
well, no matter how many,
weird and so normal, right?
Yes, and no matter how many books you read or blogs you read or an expert that you are, it's like everything is just somebody else's opinion.
Yes,
and so that's great, and that's what worked for them, but it's like trial and error. That's all it is. There's no true handbook on motherhood.
Right. And I think that has, for me having like Arlo, my second kiddo, I planned a home birth and I had a home birth. Like I almost didn't at the very end. It did not go as quickly as I wanted it to. And I was due on Christmas Eve and he came at 39 weeks. And I think 2 days I went into labor.
So right before Christmas Eve.
Right. It was I went into labor on the 18th.
Okay.
And he, thankfully, like the first part of my labor was great. You know, it's just so interesting to get to experience it again as like live in my own body and my own experience, like versus what I see. And to like, it was really hard for me to drop the midwife side of my brain and to not like judge what was happening.
Sure.
Because I had as a second time on, I was like, oh, it's 5 centimeters. Okay, great. Like I'm going to have a baby probably by midnight, you know, when they checked me at 5 p.m. And I had just been like sort of contracting all day. I had bloody show in the morning and I was like, I'd been like having cramps through the night. And I was like, oh, I think I was having contractions, you know, mostly sleeping through in between them. And like I woke up, went pee, and like wiped. And I was like, oh my God, I have bloody show. And Rachel had just left for work. And I was like, you have to come home. Like, I think the baby's going to come, you know? And so we actually both worked from home that day. I finished up. It was my last day of scheduled work. And I was doing like building our new computer system. And the lady that I was I was like helping to like complete our new electronic medical records for the birth center here. And she was it was her daughter's birthday. And I was like, it's totally fine. Let's just do this. Like it'll distract me through early labor and I'm not in active labor. If I have to go, I'll go. But like, I'd be so happy to wrap this up before I go out, you know? Yeah. So I like just worked from home, like sitting on a yoga ball, looking at screens with her. And, she was so sweet. And
did it distract you, or were you?
It did. You know, okay. It was great. You know, it was because it was really just early labor. And then at 5 o'clock, my friend and midwife, one of the midwives that I was working with, came over and she checked me and she swept my membranes. And I was like, okay, I was 5. And I was like, all right, great. And then after that, things picked up. And Greta, my Gigi, or we call her Gigi, she stayed home. And like I put her to bed, but I was like having a hard time getting her down because by 7:30 or whatever time it was, I was like, oh no, this is like painful now, you know.
You're putting her down to bed?
Yes. I mean, I was like,
you're a rock star.
I was. I mean, I don't know. I got through it, but I was like, oh, it's getting uncomfortable. I don't really want to be doing this. Like I knew that it was getting more active. And my friends came over and I was like, okay, it could go quickly. So in like over the next few hours, another midwife friend came over who was there for support for both of my births actually. And then, the midwife who I had my friends as like my support people. And then I hired a midwife who like I'm not, really friends with outside of, in the midwifery community. Not that I don't like her. It was that because I wanted somebody to have a little bit more of a, objective eye, you know, and like if something went wrong or something happened, I didn't want to like have that affect my relationship with my friends.
Sure.
So they came over and then like the first part of labor with them, like got in the tub. It was great, but I was like laughing. I was like, I feel like I'm doing the same contraction over and over again. They're like, yeah, that's what you do. And I was like, no. Like, I can tell it's not doing anything, you know?
Like it's not progressing.
Yes. And it was just being impatient. Like, I wanted it to be a fast second baby, like many other second babies that I had seen be born. Yeah. And after that was at like 7 or 8, everybody came over. And then I was like 8 centimeters around midnight. At 1, they checked me again. And she broke my water, and I thought I was just going to have the baby. I could not bend I again was having like really intense like hip and back pain, and I couldn't bend at my thigh here. I couldn't, I had to keep my legs straight. It was such a weird. I just had never seen anyone.
Is that a normal thing?
And I was like, okay. So of course, like I was having something that I was like, what is happening inside of me?
Yeah.
Why isn't this baby just coming out? And then like, I'm like laying in bed thinking of and then I went into my midwife brain and I was like, okay, like what can like the baby didn't just come out. It's been another hour. Like, how can I get out of this? You know, like I was like, okay, I'm going to call Nora, who's one of my coworkers who wrote a book that like our classes are based on. And she I was like, no, but if I call her, like I had planned in my head, I was like, I'm going to call an ambulance. They're going to pull up in my back driveway here. I'm going to go get in it. I'm going to call Nora and I'm going to go get an epidural. And I was like, I'm just the midwife who doesn't have a home birth, whatever. At that point, I did not care. But I was like asking the midwife that was with me, like medications. They were trying a million things, trying to get me to change positions. And I just was like, I could not do it. And there was 4 people pushing on my pelvis as like literally as hard as they could. I was like, please push harder. I was like, I tell my friend Mira, who's a midwife and was there, I'm like, I just want to see her, like when we're dead, can I just see what all of our pelvises look like so that I know like this kind of pelvis kind of sucks for births, or that one is like, that's the baby they're the pelvis that babies just fall out of, And, because I was like, oh, okay, yeah, my pelvis, there's some kind of weird twists and turns that do not make it easy for babies to get out of. Finally, though, Mira, my friend, convinced me to try standing up again and try getting in the shower. I was like squeezing Rachel's hand the whole time. And as soon as I finally stood up again, because I kind of got stuck in the bed, I stood up and I felt Arlo finally descend, and I like flopped onto the floor of the bedroom downstairs on the carpet. I was like, he's coming. And I like put my fingers inside of my vagina and like held my cervix back. And I was like, I can push him out now. And I was like, it was so funny. The midwife, I like pushed his head out and I was like, pull him out. And she was like, and I go, am I having a shoulder dystocia? And she was like, no. And I was like, this baby is coming out of me, right? I need to be done with this,
It's amazing you could feel that.
I was like, yeah, I am done. It was like my bones just felt crazy. And I like had bruises on my back for like.
Because they were pushing so
hard? Because of pushing, yes.
Wow.
I just was like, oh my God. Okay. I'm like, I'm glad that we're done with 2. I got the both experiences. No more. No. I'm 40. I'm like, whatever. That's nothing. If people... like I support women older than 40 having babies, but I myself am done with 2. And I just am like, it doesn't get easier. He was also 2.5 pounds bigger than Greta.
Oh, wow. He was
13. So, and she was 6'6".
Oh, okay. 8'13".
Yeah. 8'13".
Oh, got it.
Not
okay.
13.
I thought you meant 13 pounds. I was like, wait, what?
No, he was 8'13". And I was just like, I was so great to be home. And of course, like 2 hours after the midwives left, our daughter's like, she's an early riser still this morning. She was up at 5:50 a.m.
Oh.
No matter how much we bribe her.
Oh, no. So you're saying it doesn't change?
Oh, God, no. I'm like, here's your green light. You can have stickers. You can have M&Ms. You can watch a show. What can I use to bribe you to not wake me up until after 6 a.m.?
Yeah.
Because I do not do well waking up in the 5 o'clock hour. Anyway, so Arlo, like we were so glad to be home, but Rachel walked her to school like in Rachel's pajamas, 2 hours later, because she was like, we just had a baby, we're so exhausted.
Even if Greta was in her pajamas, I'd be like,
whatever.
Yeah, whatever.
I think we got her dressed. Who knows? But she was like so happy and has been such a sweet big sister. It's been she like loves him so much. We were at the park today, she like wants to protect him so much, but I'm like, oh, let him use his own body to, she's like, like he's going to fall. I don't want him to fall, but she's like picking him up or kind of like body checks him all the time. And I'm like, he is definitely, he was a bigger kid at birth. And I'm like, he is going to surpass you in size relatively shortly here. She's still like this little sprightly child, you know, and he's just, I think probably a very average size kid, but seems really big to me.
Yeah.
So.
Wow. So 2 crazy different births.
Yeah.
And I think it's beautiful because your story just really aligns with, we have a plan.
Yes.
And we want it to go a certain way, but it's really just, making sure that baby is happy and healthy is number one. Cause I do know my biggest fear was having a C-section.
Yeah.
But my sister has had all C-section babies and they're all great and she's great. And so as much as it was a fear of mine, it also would have been something that I would have just
You do. And I think that like having the perspective, one thing, it was really helpful to me to do the birth classes that we teach here. We teach the midwives, I'll teach them. And I was like, are able to find like beauty and power and learn things about yourself through any experience, whatever the experience is that it takes to get your baby here. You know, it's like that. It's not that it provides any birth and pregnancy, and it provides us this like life and experience and opportunity to learn things about ourselves and the world, you know?
Mm-hmm, for sure. That's why moms are so great.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, it's hard because I definitely am careful to not be like, it's not the healthy baby isn't the only thing that matters, but like it also, our experience, it's this balance, you know, the woman's experience, it matters too, but that you can be, however a baby needs to get here, that you can be respected and empowered and included in the like conversation and all of that. And I felt like I got that in both of my births, you know, and in the care that I had. So I think that the mothering has impacted my life as a midwife more than my own birth experiences, you know, although I think that it's helpful, I share them with people, but I think that the being a mom part in some ways, I don't know, that it's just added more layers to the way that I am a midwife. So
yeah, for sure.
And especially like with the anxiety and the labors that are hard and the like questioning if I can or want to keep doing it at home, you know, with that part of the birth. I'm like, I know, you know, there was a mom who I had here not that long after I gave birth that just had, a longer second labor too. And I was like, I know, I get it. I know you're going to get through this though, you know? So there are moments where I'm like, yes, I get this, you know,
for sure.
But lots of times it's like everybody feels labor and birth so differently and experiences it so differently in the way that we like interpret everything that's going on. That's like yes, I have the experience of giving birth, but I also think, the mothering part is more like it's more applicable to more women, you know?
Yeah, for sure. Well, especially if you're trying to like mentor women past birth, because I think
in the postpartum time.
Like birth is obviously a really big step, but there's also other really big
so
steps
much
that
else
comes after that. Yeah.
And thankfully, you know, in my postpartum time with Arlo has been, he's only 18 months old, so it's been totally different. I mean, he was a different sleeper from the beginning, which is like I was like at 4 weeks, he was like annoyed that I was holding him. He wanted to go to sleep at 6:00 and he like wanted me to put him down. And I was like, oh, like, wait, I'm not ready to be done holding you like while you fall asleep at night and we were watching TV, you know?
Yeah.
And he like just did longer stretches for a long time. And isn't
that funny how they're just so different?
Yeah. And I think my own having like now, you know, you're like you said, everything's trial and error. And to be like, I'm with the medication and all of that, I'm like more like, okay, I can experiment with like what's going to work here.
Yeah. One, just to be, I think you said it earlier, like just to be more empowered for making that decision.
Yes.
As a mom,
to like use your intuition, to use your like, oh yeah, okay, I know this kid, this is going to work. Like also you just know like they are so resilient, you know, like not that, I mean, the things that we're like trying that are reasonable are like, okay, maybe that's not going to work for him. Maybe it is like that you just don't, I don't know. I don't have that like fear or guilt that I did.
Yeah.
You know,
it's different.
Yeah. It's really different.
And did you start like medication, anti-anxiety medication when you had him or did you continue to take
I did. I actually stopped it before I got pregnant and I started it again at around 20 weeks because a big symptom of anxiety for me is irritability. And I just started noticing it in my relationships primarily with Rachel and Greta. And I was like, okay, you know, like let's not, like I could feel it rising basically. And so I wanted to be more proactive and I was like, okay, I'm out of the first trimester. I like accept the risks of this medication.
Sure.
And I think that there's a benefit to like living in a mom's body who is coping with life,
Yes.
you know?
Yeah. No, I hear you. I'm glad you shared that, because usually what I hear is that women feel broken.
Yeah.
And that they feel either, I don't know what the word is, like less than.
Yes.
If they do have to take this medicine.
I think I had that
really
the first time, as
Yeah.
like I had this huge hesitancy to start, like it felt like a never ending thing, or like that it like, yes, that it was like there's something wrong with me, instead of just
Yeah.
like this is the situation that's going on and this can be helpful. It's like
Yeah.
one of the things that can be helpful, and it's working to help me,
Yeah.
you know? So,
And that's what's like the beauty of it, right? Is like it's helping you and your family, and that's all that matters.
right.
But I think there's like all this pressure on us to, I don't know, cope without it.
Yeah.
But that doesn't do anybody any good.
No. And you can't, sometimes it's hard to like break the cycle of the not coping and the not worrying or worrying or obsessing or, you know, without it. I think that it's a helpful, like, wait a minute, like let's redo some of those neural pathways in there. You know, that's kind of how it was explained to me. Like, let's calm everything down here. And then your brain will, you have the space to learn how to cope with other things, you know? So, yeah, I think it's definitely been really helpful.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Okay. I feel like you've given a lot of advice already on the podcast, which has been really great. Do you have like one piece of advice that you want all moms that are listening to know?
I'm trying to think of the things that I tell people are like at baby showers. What do I write down? You know? I think just like leaning into support, say yes to support especially in the postpartum, like that we don't have to do it all by ourselves, and you don't need to do the dishes and keep your house clean. You're like, you know, in that early postpartum time, especially, or whatever, you know, it's like, let go of those little things. It is okay to just like sit in bed with your baby and like say yes to help. People really do want to help you in the postpartum time when they come over. I'm like, if somebody asks you if they can help you, like say yes. Can you get this from the grocery store? Or can you take that trash out on your way out, or whatever, you know?
Yeah. Thank you. That's really good advice. Yeah. It's so hard to say yes though.
I know.
It really is. A lot of moms say that too, though, like offer help, ask for help, take the help. And I just think it's so hard. Even today. Yeah. I would say I struggle with that. Yeah. Like, cause we all have that I want to do it all mentality. Yeah. But you got to break it.
Yes, absolutely.
Kori, thank you so much for sharing your motherhood journey with us. Yeah. I really appreciate that. And stay tuned for the next episode where Kori takes us through all the ins and outs of being a midwife. Thank you for listening. I hope you loved it. Please subscribe to this podcast so you can get the latest episodes, and tell us what you think about it in the reviews. And mamas, I love you.